I was halfway through my own bedroom window with a bag of groceries tearing under my knee when the HOA president lifted her phone and said calm as a weatherman community safety violation. 8 days earlier, my aunt handed me the deed, and the keys slid like butter. Now the lock had been changed, and my face was already blasted across the neighborhood group like I was casing the place. I'm Evan Cole. The street is Lantern Creek in Cedar Hollow, and the woman with the clipboard and the laminated badge was named Marlene Avery. If she smiled at you long enough, you'd apologize for breathing too loud. You know what I mean. She handed me a $500 violation for unsafe ingress, zip-tied an orange notice to my front door, and told me to produce a death certificate by 6, or services may be suspended, like she was reading a dinner special. I said, "That's not how any of this works," she said. "Compliance is how this works." And neighbors who used to wave at my mom were suddenly filming me like I was a raccoon in a kitchen. Humiliation doesn't smack you all at once, it creeps, and by the time the sprinklers coughed to a stop the next morning and the trash guys skipped my can, Marlene had posted a blurry photo from my garage and called it a rodent risk biohazard. This community safety, that all dressed up with a county seal that looked like it came off a discount printer. My Aunt Gloria brought the manila envelope with the deed and hugged me like she could hold the pieces in place, then said a simple sentence that changed the plan. "Your mother wanted you to have peace, not a brawl. So I promised no yelling, just paper." I met a real estate attorney named Rachel Pike who wore sneakers with her blazer and talked like a coach. She said HOAs can fine and fuss, but they can't change locks or seal your house or cut utilities. That's government power. And if someone faked a seal and used email to push it around, that starts to smell like forgery and wire fraud. "Bring boredom, not heat," she told me. "Let the receipts do the talking." I called my friend Marcus, the guy who can fix anything with a paperclip, and we sat in his garage while he scraped the HOA Facebook and the neighborhood forum, then he spun the laptop around. The violation video was scheduled for 8:55 a.m. and published at 9:11 a.m. The inspection clip starts at 9:10, which means the script was written before the play, yeah? That happened. At 6:02 a.m., the following morning, Marlene came back with a board member named Tyler, a neat lock-set case in hand, like a traveling dentist. "Final notice," she said, "dines now. 2,000 vehicles may be towed. Produce a death certificate, or we escalate to county." And when I told her she didn't have the right, she looked straight into my doorbell camera, like it was a vanity mirror, and said, "We have the responsibility." That's when the cold feeling hit. Not the "oh, no" kind. The "how did you know that" kind. Because she kept mentioning my mother's oncology schedule, as if she'd read private notes, which Marcus traced to a board Gmail that had forwarded a clinic outreach email to Marlene's personal iCloud. Something labeled wellness that became a crowbar for compliance. The twist showed up in a spiral notebook with a floral cover. My mother's tidy handwriting listing names and dates, and little quotes like, "Called me non-compliant for 2-inch weeds," and at the back, a sticky note that said, "If you're hearing this show, then the ledger." The ledger was in a zippered binder behind old tax folders. It listed fines by name and date and amount normal enough until you see half a dozen entries written days before the supposed violations, with tiny arrows to an operations fund account that did not match the HOA bank on their website. And I sat on the hallway floor with that binder across my knees and felt heat behind my eyes. Not rage, not grief, both. And I heard my mother's voice in my head saying, "Be kind, but be accurate." But we took the packet to the police substation and asked for a community liaison, Officer Dana Sloan showed up with calm eyes and a steady notebook. She compared Marlene's notice seal to a real county document, nodded when she saw the font mismatch and the serial number that belonged to a completely different form online, and said Divil is tricky, but forged insignia, lock tampering, and electronic fraud are things she can at least document then. She asked the only question that mattered. When's the meeting that night? 10 p.m., the special session folding chairs and burnt coffee smell, and a projector already humming. Tyler setting up cables like he wished the floor would swallow him, neighbors in their church clothes and gym shorts, the same faces that watched me climb through a window 2 days earlier. Marlene swept in like she'd practiced her entrance Navy suit hair. Pulled tight 2 thick stacks of paper that looked important because they were thick. Good evening. Cedar Hollow, she said, tonight we protect our neighborhood from fraud. And then the testimonials started. Mrs. Patterson saying she'd lived there 10 years and never heard of me. Mr. Harris reading about property standards, a couple in the back, murmuring about small kids and safety. And if you've ever sat through your own trial without a defense, you know the way the room leans away from you, inch by inch. She put up an enlarged copy of my old name change, like it was a smoking gun. Called it classic inheritance fraud, waved a brand new Emergency Rule 9, with a footer that said, Revised 9, 14 a.m. And when she asked for hands to declare me a nuisance occupant and revert the house to HOA management palms, started rising like she'd cast a spell. I stood up before she counted and said, For the record, I have 5 items. And she didn't like the phrase for the record, and her smile twitched, and I walked to the lectern with a slim folder and a pen that didn't click, so I wouldn't make drumbeat noises with my nerves. I laid them out one by one and spoke like I was explaining a recipe. Certified warranty deed with book and page locksmith affidavit. With macro photos of tool marks on a deadbolt changed after my mother passed comparison of her notice, and a real county form with mismatched fonts and seal color and a serial number that belongs to a different archive document. Metadata showing her violation post, scheduled at 8:55 and published at 9:11, while her inspection video begins at 9:10. And my mother's ledger with fines written before alleged violations and arrows to an account that is not the HOA bank. The room made a sound I can only describe as humming water. Wheeler went pale. Mrs. Patterson covered her mouth, and Marlene tried to find her smile and came up empty. This is a smear, she said, a moist thinner. We follow procedure because people like you show up with tears and stories. And I said people like me, or people like my mother, who forgot her glasses, and let you read the line where she supposedly consented. I pressed play on an audio note my mom recorded. And the room heard her say, If Thomas faces fines, dated. Before they say he did anything, someone's printing outcomes first. And silence rolled across the chairs. And that's when Marlene snapped and said, Because otherwise they ignore me. They ignore safety. They ignore standards. They ignore what this place could be if people complied. Which is not a slip, it's a confession. Not protecting, performing. Officer Sloan stepped forward, then steady, as the minute hand introduced herself, asked Marlene to step aside. And Marlene said this was a civil meeting, and law enforcement had no place here, which is something people say right before it gets quiet enough to hear a paper slide across a table. Because that's when Rachel set down the TRO packet, and Tyler finally broke and said, She told us to backdate. She said no one checks footers, and you could feel neighbors lean away from Marlene like a tide going out. Officer Sloan said, For forged insignia, unlawful lock change, and disseminating fraudulent documents. She was detained pending investigation. The cuffs clicked. The projector fan wound down, a metal chair scraped. And that was it. No applause, no drum roll, just the sound of a story ending where it should. On the consequence, not the party. Here's the thing people argue about after. Some say HOAs keep the grass cut and the porches painted. And if you want freedom, move to the woods. Some say they're mini dictatorships that turn neighbors into hall monitors. And the truth is messier and sits in your chest like a coin, because there is a line, and you know it when you feel yourself asking permission to be a person. I didn't make a victory speech. I called a locksmith. I turned the sprinklers back on. I planted rosemary because the porch still smelled like lemon oil, and because my mother believed a house loves the people who tend it. And I taped the wrinkled orange notice inside the pantry door as a reminder that be kind and bring receipts can live in the same sentence. Maybe you had your own. Marlene, maybe it wasn't an HOA. Maybe it was a boss who loved policies more than people, a relative who weaponized we until it meant me, or a neighbor who auditioned for power while calling it safety. Tell me where the line is for you. When do community standards become control? Who gets to draw that line? And have you ever had to bring boredom and receipts to win your own life back? Drop your story in the comments. Argue with me. If you think Marlene was right until the forged seal, or if you saw the red flag sooner, and if you want more real stories about people who got underestimated, pushed around, and then changed the ending, like the video, subscribe and share this with the friend who needs a reminder that dignity isn't a favor you ask for, it's a lock you keep, and the key you learn to use.